Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. This is episode number 187, and we are discussing Quatermass. And it is the British science. Well, actually, it's a British science fiction serial that was conceived about 70 years ago on the BBC. And with me to discuss this film, this series, is my friend, an author and a columnist from the folks who remember him back in his Starlog days, Mr. David Hirsch. David, welcome.
Hi, Roy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, David?
Yeah. We've been talking about trying to do this for a while now because we're dipping right back into the early 50s.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. And I have to come clean, David. I was not aware of Quatermass. So this has been an experience for me just to learn about it and to to watch it. And the fact that this was conceived 70 years ago just kind of blows my mind, but it's from the 50s.
Right. Well, it really is like the birth of British science fiction. This came about in 1953. And in 1953, according to a book that was written about the author Nigel Kneale, who wrote the screenplay, there were probably only about 2.7 million TV sets in Britain at the time. And the majority of them were purchased to see the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. That was the big deal to get people to buy TVs. And most people watched it. I think they said the coronation was seen by 20 million people, which means a lot of people crowded in to watch it on other people's TV sets. So it was very unusual for someone to have a TV set in their sitting room back then. And the BBC, which, it's funny because Nigel Kneale referred to the BBC as radio with pictures. But in fact, it was more like going to the West End to see a stage play on television, because most BBC dramas were done live. They were not pre-recorded, and they were shot in studio all as you were watching them on television. And back in when the first Quatermass serial, the Quatermass Experiment, was broadcast, there was not a really reliable way to record these programs for rebroadcast. If something was successful, the BBC would just call the cast back and they'd restage it another night, just like having another live play.
Right.
So, they would do a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of normal things you would see. But in the summer of 53, they found themselves with a 6-week hole in their Saturday night schedule. And they turned to Nigel Kneale, who was a young writer who was on staff at the BBC. And they said, we need something right away to fill this slot. So he jumped at this chance to really push the medium. And luckily, he was teamed again with a producer-director at the BBC, Rudolph Cartier. And both of them really felt that most of the people who were working at the BBC were underusing the medium and that there were a way to make things better. So Kneale, who was not a science fiction writer, really, he was more of a dramatist, but he hit upon the sense at the time that space flight was this big, dangerous last frontier. We don't know what's going to happen to the human body when we leave the atmosphere. There was a lot of supposition. Nobody really knew. So he wrote a screenplay, which he entitled Bring Something Back, was its original title. And it was about an ill-fated rocket flight that went up and came back, and this mystery ensued. And when you watch the Quatermass Experiment, it's less science fiction. It's more of a giant mystery, because 3 men go up, 1 man comes back, and as far as the instruments aboard the spaceship tell them, that nobody left the ship. So what happened? And over a 6-week period in these nice little half-hour dramas, we learn this mystery of what happened. And it was a tremendous hit. Unfortunately, as I said, they didn't have a way to record them properly. They attempted to do kinescopes, of the first 2 episodes, and they still exist. People can see them on YouTube. They'll notice the second episode of the Kinescope is terrible, and about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, a fly lands on the screen and stays there for a good 30% of the drama. So I think at that point they said it's not worth recording these. So the other 4 episodes are lost. The BBC in early 2001 or so put out the 3 Quatermass serials on DVD. The first one, they just gave you the first 2 surviving episodes, and then they gave you the scripts so that you can figure out, where the story went. Because of the success of it, the Hammer Films, which was in its infancy at the time, they were just doing comedies, I believe, stuff, got the rights and went ahead and did a feature film with Brian Donlevy in the lead. They decided not to take any of the cast from the British drama. And as was the norm at the time, the BBC sort of shut Nigel Kneale out. And it was only through the grace of the people working at Hammer who actually brought him in as sort of a consultant. But he saw no money from it. His name doesn't even appear, I think, on the screen. So they went ahead and did this feature film. It was released in the United States as The Creeping Unknown instead of the Quatermass Experiment. And Hammer used an X instead of the EX for experiment because they wanted the film to have what was called an X rating in England for adult audiences. And it was a hit. It played very well both in the United States and in England. And Hammer was so pleased with it, their screenwriter who wrote the screenplay, Jimmy Sangster, wrote a feature film which became X the Unknown, but Nigel Kneale did not want to allow Quatermass to be used in it, so they had to recast it with another American actor and change the character's name. But if you watch it, you kind of see that Jimmy Sangster came in with the same idea. It should be noted that the director of the feature film was Val Guest, who did a lot of heavy rewriting on screenplay. And Guest famously didn't want to do the movie at first, but his wife convinced him that it was worth doing. And what's very unique about Guest's approach to the movie is he does it almost with sort of a newsreel look, very fast-moving, realistic. And he condenses the Nigel Kneale screenplay really well into it, so that it retains a lot of the drama, but he changed the ending in a certain respect because Kneale, when they got to the last chapter, and I'm not really giving anything away because since the serial doesn't exist, what happened is they discover that some alien life force drifting through space has penetrated the ship and has absorbed 2 of the astronauts and then basically housed itself in the surviving astronaut. And eventually this creature begins to mutate into another form. So for the end of the serial, because the BBC had no visual effects department, it was up to Nigel Kneale and his then fiancée to create the creature, that the alien creature that would be seen briefly in the the upper levels of Westminster Abbey. And they built it basically with a glove on like a heavy duty work glove. And it worked really well for the film, for the BBC serial. For the feature film, Les Bowie, who was Britain's master of special effects, created a creature using tripe and stuff, and they also hired an octopus to double it. So Kneale didn't like the fact that it had a kind of a more obvious form, or the way Quatermass was kind of played by Don Donlevy, which was, he wasn't the, the intellect, the thinker. He was more, as he called him, brutish.
Well, Reginald Tate was the one that originated the
Yeah,
part in the
yes.
serial too. And David, before we go on, I just want to welcome some of the viewers that are out there. They're commenting too, and then we'll jump right back into this. So I just want to say hi to Randy Lee is joining us. Randy, welcome. I see Dennis Chevalier is joining us from Canada. Welcome, Dennis. Also, Colin Curlis is joining us from the UK. Welcome, Colin. And then also Martin is joining us from New York State. Christian is joining us from Canada. Excuse me. And I see Sue is out there. She's joining us from Massachusetts. And let me see. I just want to make sure I got everybody. Shari is joining us from downstairs. She's saying hello. And Lou Place is joining us, and he's joining us from Rhode Island. Hey, Lou.
Hey, Lou.
And friend Bill Scarrato is joining us from Harmony, New Jersey. Welcome, Bill. Good to see you out there as well. Daniel Rodriguez is joining us from Pennsylvania. Dan, welcome. I think you're back from Texas, Dan, so it's good to see you out there. So I just wanted to catch up with everybody. Dan said, was it targeted for more adult audience rather than the teen crowd?
Yes. No, it was definitely adult. It's very adult drama, and it's not even targeted for a science fiction audience. It's really just trying to be a drama with science fiction undertones to it.
Well, yeah, because this was filmed live. Well, excuse me.
Yes.
It was broadcast live. So really, in regards to effects, I mean, I'm referring to the 1950 serial, the 53 serial. You have to imagine they have everything set up in such a way. So to your point, it's more drama, it's more suspense. It's like what happened, who did it, why did it happen, and that's what they're really building up to, as opposed to like a sci-fi serial that has a lot of different things going on as far as like optical effects and such.
Right. I mean, if you're familiar with any of the early classic Doctor Who's, which were kind of done the same way, except the technology was actually a lot more advanced, because as the Quatermass serials were shot, the technology became better. For the first one, as I said, Kneale had to do the visual effect for the creature at the very end. Through most of it, there's very little visual effects in the first serial. If you have seen the feature film, the rocket returns to Earth and crashes in a field. And they built, a section of the rocket coming out of the ground, and then Les Bowie's people did a beautiful matte painting for a long shot of the whole tail of the rocket hanging in the air. For the serial, the rocket crashes actually in London into a house. So what they did was they built a multi-level set, which in the existing footage is really spectacular for the time. So you see at one point there's an old lady sitting, on the next floor waiting for someone to help her and her cat down. But the rocket is coming through the wall at one end of the set. So they would I think in the first serial they had the control room, and then they had this this crashed house set, and they would move sometimes by putting in little video inserts or filmed inserts at the time. And it's funny because BBC used to film on 35 millimeter during the 50s, and then when they went to Doctor Who, all the most of the filmed inserts were 16 mil, which is why they look fuzzy and the video looks so sharp. And from the numbers that I saw, I mean, Nigel Kneale, I think, was paid about in 1953 money, 250 pounds for his script, which was almost the entire budget for the writing department anyway. They spent a total of 4,000 pounds for the entire serial.
Wow.
That's what it was done. And it was shot just like Doctor Who, it was shot in the BBC's oldest studio, Creaky Studio. The interesting thing is their original choice for Quatermass was Andre Morel, and he was unavailable. And Morel eventually came back about 5 years later to do the third serial. So there's an interesting story too, but by the fact that literally every one of the TV serials had a different Quatermass.
Mm-hmm.
But Brian Donlevy really is the only actor who's played him twice. Technically, there is an exception to the rule, and we'll get to that a little bit later.
Did you have a preference, David? I'm just curious. Yourself?
I think Morrell really did a good job. I don't hate Brian Donlevy as much as Nigel Kneale did. I think because Kneale had something kind of else in mind.
Okay.
So, and Andrew Kerr, who was Quatermass in the film adaptation of Quatermass from the Pit, he was also very good, but his character was written from a different perspective in that one because of Quatermass's position, and we'll get onto that later. Quatermass himself, just to give you a little background story, he is the head of the British Rocket Group, which in a sense is partly government funded, but it's kind of played like it's an independent, amateur rocket group. Mm-hmm. But we know they have government funding. So Quatermass is responsible for this rocket that goes up. That's why he's involved in it. Right. And there are some wonderful characters that Kneale creates through this. Not just the surviving astronaut, his wife. We also have this wonderful reporter James Fullilove, who investigates this whole thing, and he links a lot of what's going on outside in the outside world with what's going on within Quatermass's world.
And then there's also like a side drama that's going on too with the wife of the astronaut, and then with the doctor.
Right. The doctor. She was planning to walk out on him before the flight. Yeah. Which is going to tell him when he came back, I'm in love with the doctor and not you anymore, so type of thing. But that changes. As I said, it's written really as a regular dramatic story, just instead of them, going off to war or exploring undersea, they went into space. Yeah. And then the whole thing with what our surviving astronaut is becoming as he's slowly evolving into this other creature is also carefully done with a little bit of makeup in one scene. There's a wonderful scene where he has an encounter with a pharmacist, which is really well played. They have this whole sequence where a pair of lovers are sitting by on a park bench at night, and they see something on this little island in the water. And we don't see it, but based on their description, it's something horrific. Right. But it's all done, off screen, and which I think is actually more terrifying than when you see things on screen. I think the scariest movies are the ones where you don't see what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. It's the implication in your imagination that's really taking hold, and you're wondering what's actually going on. And then that way, it's not cheesy. Especially
or a disappointment, because you've got something in your mind that could be even more horrific instead of, a giant lobster or something like that. But, it shows how you have a writer and a producer director who really are pushing the medium and know what can we do with what little we have. And this is where some of the greatest, science fiction films, especially here in America, we had a lot of these, films that were done in the 50s and stuff. And some of the best ones were the ones that were done for the least amount of money because they knew how to work around their low budget.
Yep. Keep you in the shadows. And that's Dan is commenting. He's saying it's amazing what they were able to accomplish with such a limited budget. And
yeah. Also, the BBC wasn't as strict with, regulations. There are pluses and minus sides to having unions, and if you're reading the history of Century 21, the Jerry Anderson Company, when the unions started getting involved around Captain Scarlet, it became more expensive, and the artists involved had less fun doing things because, there was one story about one of the model makers who said, "Oh, I finally figured out how to do the miniature trees in the middle of the night, went to the studio and to fix what I was doing. And then I got in trouble with the union because I was there after hours." So it kind of kills sometimes the momentum of the artistry. So there's plus and minus. People get, the money they deserve, the benefits they deserve, but you run against this wall that hits your creativity sometimes. And back then, the BBC was, we don't care about this project. Do what you want, and they just let them run with it, and they really did shine through. So that by the time they got the opportunity to do the second serial, which Kneale kind of lazily admits he called it Quatermass 2 because he couldn't think of anything better. They had a lot more money. They actually had a special effects crew. And that was Bernard Wilkie, and who was like the grandfather of BBC visual effects department. There was somebody else.
Time, I mean, there were still some movies being made, and granted, this was a serial, but somebody had commented a little earlier about War of the Worlds, and that was in 1953. So really, things were starting to take hold, and science fiction was really starting to open up in this time period.
Oh yeah, well,
we had more money for the second go around definitely added to it. I just want to say hi to Gordon. Gordon's out there saying hello to us.
Hey,
Gordon, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
And Lou commented, said, "Low budget is my middle name. Ask Roy."
There again, there's somebody who really excels at doing it. He can work out, how to do things on a shoestring budget, which is genius.
Absolutely.
Before we get to the second Quatermass serial, we've talked about the movie, and we did talk about X the Unknown, didn't we? Yeah. Because sorry about that. So by the time they came around to doing Quatermass 2, one of the things that happened was Reginald Tate had passed away. So they had to find another actor, and then they went with John Robinson, who I think John Robinson actually came in late to the project, if I remember correctly. And he had a lot of problems with the scientific dialogue. But because they had a bigger budget, they were not only able to do visual effects, but they did location shooting. And the plot for this one was Quatermass is basically up against the government on the funding of a moon base that he has developed. And they're basically killing the project. And he meets up with a friend who they discover that there is an installation out in this remote area of England that looks suspiciously like the moon project. And what the production actually did was they shot at a Shell refinery, which actually happens to be the same location you see in the feature film adaptation.
Okay.
So Shell was really thrilled to let people run around and shoot guns and do explosions in their refinery. It's okay. But it just opened up to this spectacular palette for them. And what's going on with this refinery is these micrometeorites are falling from the sky, and people are somehow getting infected if they come into contact with these micrometeorites. And it turns out it's an alien invasion from another type of life force. And whatever they're collecting at the plant, these little rock falls that haven't infected people, they're bringing into the plant and loading into this dome, this giant dome. And they're creating an atmosphere for this alien life form. And of course, again, the second feature film, which Val Guest again directed and co-wrote, decides that what's in the dome is going to be a monster. So we get to see this giant alien life form come out of the dome, which doesn't happen in the BBC serial, at least very clearly. But there's some wonderful, really inventive, low-budget special effects. that the BBC did for theirs. I think they shot the tank explosion in the dome explosion in a fish tank upside down, so they would get a cloud coming out of it that they couldn't do, just with smoke and stuff. So some really inventive things.
I was just going to say, doing something like that is pretty creative, and it almost reminds me of with Star Trek, the transporter effect with the what was it, the aluminum dust, the way they started.
Yeah, the aluminum dust, and you stirred it around in a like a cylinder.
Somebody was asking, and I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So Nick McCarty's joining us from the UK. Welcome, Nick. So Nick was saying, are there any Space 1999 tie-ins? And actually, as David has been saying,
Guest, of course.
Yeah, Val Guest, and he did the 3 episodes. He directed the 3 episodes of 1999 in year 2, The Rules of Luton, also the A.B. Chrysalis, and Dorzak. So just wanted to put that there.
And Val was a very prolific director and writer. And of course, if you want to do steps from somebody, basically the feature films having Les Bowie do the effects, 2 of Les Bowie's apprentices were Derek Meddings and Brian Johnson, who went on into their stuff. So Les set a lot of people up in the industry. And Les knew how to do stuff, again, on a shoestring. I mean, the classic one was the crawling eye, which is also known as the Trelleborg Terror, where to have the cloud on the mountain, they just stuck cotton on a photograph. And it looks great in the film,
It worked. We haven't actually covered that movie on this show yet, and it's something I definitely want to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of in the same genre as this, because that started off as a TV drama as well. And 2 of the actors that are in the feature film were in the TV drama as well. Janet Monroe being one of them. So there were a lot of stuff. Now, during the time of these Quatermass stuff, Nigel Kneale and Rolf Cartier did a lot of other stuff as well, including 1984 with Peter Cushing, which was, a big deal because of the scene where they had the helmet with the live rat in it on his head, which a lot of BBC got a lot of hate mail about. How dare you have something this horrible on tea time, whatever. So they did that. He also Nigel Kneale wrote a screenplay which became the movie Abominable Snowman in the Himalayas.
Oh, okay.
I think it was just called, what was it called? The Snowman, he had a very modest title. And of course it had to become this marquee title for the feature film. But Peter Cushing was in the TV serial as well. So they had a lot of, there's a lot of jumping back and forth with this.
David Martin's asking, was the Shell refinery used in Doctor Who as well as Blake 7? Do you know?
Very probably. I don't think it was that far. For the BBC to have used it in this serial, I don't think it was that far out of London.
So it probably would make sense that they did do that. And then he also commented about the Julian Glover being in the movie version.
In the movie version of the 3rd Quatermass serial.
Yes.
There's we're kind of and if we want to go again, Julian Glover's wife, Isla Blair, who was in Space 1999, was in the final Quatermass serial.
Oh, okay.
As I believe the prime minister or government minister, if I remember correctly. But we'll get to that. We're jumping way ahead. Yeah, it was called The Creature, The Abominable Snowman. The original teleplay was The Creature, which is, again, Peter Cushing, and they had to simulate, the Himalayas in the studio. But all those are really. I think 1984 may still exist. I'm not sure, but I know The Creature, I think, was lost. I mean, there's a lot of serials at the time that either were not recorded or they were erased. Just
when
like
did 1984 come out? Was it in the 60s or?
Yeah, no, in the 50s.
It was in the 50s. Okay.
Let me just. I'm scanning. I've got a copy here of the Nigel Kneale biography. let's see, 1980. It was in 54. It was in between the first two Quatermass serials they did.
Wow.
And it also starred Donald Pleasance and Andre Morell. Were in it. You know, a lot of these people were. I mean, Peter Cushing didn't start with Hammer really until he did. Was it Dracula or Frankenstein? I forget which one was his first one.
Then he was in always all of those movies with.
Because he liked how Hammer was treating him, so he stayed with it because it was a. I don't think they considered him much of a lead actor in a lot of the other stuff he was in. He was more, so I think he liked that idea. But so between all this, they did these films. The Quatermass 2 was released in the United States under the title Enemy from Space, and until about, I think it was the late 90s, it disappeared almost completely from American screens because of a conflict with Kneale. There was some rumor he actually held some kind of rights to it. And then Anchor Bay released the Quatermass films on videotape in their uncut British versions. And then they eventually came out on DVD and then Blu-ray. You can get Kino has put out the Quatermass Experiment on Blu-ray, and it's the uncut British version, and it's got it's got a commentary. Commentary with Val Guest, moderated by Marcus Hearn. It's got a bit with John Carpenter. I think Brian Johnson does some stuff on the two Shout Factory releases of Quatermass 2 and 5 Million Years to Earth.
Oh, you mean he's interviewed? Film. They do comment. He does commentary.
I don't know if he's not in the commentary. I think there's like a 5 or 10 minute interview sequence because he talks about Les Bowie, who did the effects for them.
Okay.
I don't know if he was on the. Frankenstein was his first. Okay, thank you, Christian.
Yep.
Because I couldn't remember if he was in Dracula, but so as I said, when the BBC put out the original serials, it also includes a terrific book by the viewing notes. I want to say his name because he's Andrew Pixley, who does all the great books for Network now and all their shows, especially the Anderson stuff.
Yep.
So when we get to the third Quatermass serial, which Quatermass 2 was in 55, so now we get to 57, and we've got 58, Quatermass in the Pit. Now they've really, BBC's got their, all their production really advanced, and they do have full kinescopes of both those serials available. You could find them on YouTube if you look for them. Also, someone did some really nice recaps of the missing 4 episodes of Quatermass Experiment. So in Quatermass, Quatermass in the Pit, is a bit different because Quatermass is not the main character, as it were. It has to do with an object that's discovered during a building construction in London. It became a subway construction in the movie. And they discover what they think is an unexploded bomb, and it turns out to be some kind of spacecraft. And Quatermass at the time is again trying to prevent his rocket group from being taken over by the military. And he goes along with the military officer who's been put in charge to investigate this unexploded bomb. And they learn that this is apparently some kind of spacecraft that has been buried there since prehistoric times, when man was just, rising up, evolving, from Neanderthal. And they discovered that the occupants of the craft were responsible for our evolution from Neanderthal to man. And they believe they are They came from Mars when Mars was dying, and it was their effort to genetically modify us to basically become the Martians to help their race survive. And it's a very ambitious and cleverly done sequel. The production designer on it, to create the illusion of the pit being dug as they excavated the spacecraft, they raised the walls of the excavation up to the rafters of the studio, so that this work shack that was originally sort of on ground level is now up here, and they have to walk down on ramps. And
that was clever.
It was a very clever illusion. For the feature film, they went an easy route of just a subway tunnel, because it actually fit more in with the modern thing, because Hammer got so involved in doing the horror movies that they they had the rights, and they let the rights sit for almost 10 years before they got around to doing the movie. But it's a really well done sequel. Another little Jerry Anderson connection to it is the female lead is played by the actress who did the voice of Tintin in the Thunderbirds series. And basically the lead is this paleontologist, archaeologist. I forget what he is. I think he's an archaeologist. It was Sek Linder, who played Felix Leiter in Goldfinger.
Oh, okay.
So it's a good role for him, and he basically runs with the whole thing. Quatermass is sort of his, sidekick in this, as it were. But he went instead of going from, an alien invasion, which was the first two. What Kneale is exploring in this is the origin of evil, and his theory is the Martians were an insectoid race that believed that you had to cull the weaker members of society to keep it strong. So they would have these like mass cullings, like a purge, their own version. He had the purge before the purge.
Right.
So maybe the people owe him money.
Inspiration for that.
Yeah. And, it's funny because even on the low budget, they do a really good sort of representation of what the Martian purge will look like with these tiny little models of the Martians. But it just goes with that is why do people kill people? Why is, indiscriminately, we kill, why do we hate the people who are different from us? Where does, that come from? Our prejudices. And it's again, a really good exploration of the human spirit.
It's taking a different direction. It's going in a different direction than just having like the aliens, like as such an alien attack or an aliens that are taking over as they did in the first serial. It's a shift. It's still dealing with conflict, but it's dealing with conflict in a different way, and it's conflict that took place in the past as opposed to the present, which is interesting.
And the nice little twist to the story is the fact that we discover that the people who are different now, the ones that need to be culled, are the people who are not the Martians. That the ones that want to cull the weaker ones are the people who are the direct descendants of the Martians, or what the Martians have, the original Neanderthals who have been genetically altered,
right,
to carry the Martian DNA. And I guess it has a little to do also with colonialism, as it were.
Yeah, it definitely has that's an interesting twist on that. David, I got a couple of comments that are coming through. So Christian said he heard that Anchor Bay does not exist anymore. That was one thing that he commented on.
No.
Sue wanted me to ask you, she said, Roy, please ask David, how did he become interested in Quatermass, and what were his very first memories of Quatermass?
Oh, the original movies. when they were out as the creeping unknown, enemy from space, 5 million years to Earth. I don't know when I actually linked them all as the same character, but I definitely, well, I guess with the Brian Don movie, you would think that. I don't remember how far I seen them, but it wasn't really until this came out that I saw the serials. What I did see was, I think around 1979, Kneale's original scripts for the serials were reissued on paperback. They had been released, I think, in the late 50s on paperback. And then they came out again with photo sections and everything. So that was my first real experience to the serials. And I think that's when I started to become more interested in the BBC serials, because, early on, my first exposure to Doctor Who were the Peter Cushing movies.
Right.
So then it was like, oh yeah, it's a TV show. What's the TV show like? And I remember when I was working for Starlog, we had only just gotten the Tom Baker serials here in the late, I think around 79. And only some handful of public television stations had some of the John Pertwees earlier on, but it was not in New York. So my biggest exposure to Doctor Who was the novels that came out, all the Target novels. They were great for commuting because I'd read them on the train going in and out of the city for work. So I wanted to know more about, especially when you read the novels, you try and picture, how is this done on a TV budget?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's why I became
visuals going on in the background when you're thinking about that.
Yeah.
And that actually leads into my other question. Martin was asking, he said, were there any novels made from the series?
There were no novels made from the first three. There was a novel released maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Somebody decided to novelize X the Unknown, which I think you can get on iBooks. It may be also on Kindle. And then when Kneale did his last Quatermass serial, instead of doing the script, they actually did a novel of it. So there is a novelization that's bopping around of what's called the Quatermass Conclusion, which came out in 79. Kneale had left the BBC, I think, somewhere around the late 50s. His contract was up, and I forget whether or not he did want to renew it or whatever. So he was basically a writer for hire, but he did work for the BBC for a bit after that as a freelancer. And then as independent television became bigger in England, Verity Lambert, who was one of the co-creators of Doctor Who, she started working for Thames Television. And when the BBC opted out of doing the fourth Quatermass serial in the 70s, she picked it up. So that went to Thames Television. And they decided to shoot it on film and do it so that they could do 4-hour episodes instead of 6 half-hours like the other ones, but with the idea that they could edit it down to a feature film as well for international release. So there's actually 2 versions of this. There's the 4-hour, 4-part version, and then there's a movie that's slightly under 2 hours that was edited from it. And essentially what they did was they culled almost an entire episode. Which
it was almost like a compilation, right? Of
right,
episodes.
But it's weird because if you get the movies, because it was released here, believe it or not, on A&E, originally put it out. And what they did was they gave you, and of course in their cheap way of the same art, you've got the 4 parts and then you've got the movie.
Right.
And the biggest difference is in one episode, I think it's part 3, Quatermass gets separated from this woman who's driving him to London for a meeting. When they get ambushed by a mob, because London has basically the gas has run out, food is scarce, government is failing, and whatever. So there's all these gangs ruling the street and everything. And he gets separated, and he winds up with a colony of elderly people who are living under an automotive junkyard. And he meets a lot of elderly scientists there who eventually come in, and they're the ones that save the day. But for the feature version, they shot an alternate scene where they get away from the mob, and then they don't explain the fact that they've got these elderly scientists working for them later on. So they cut out this whole sequence, which is actually a very nice sequence. It's just, again, to show you the state of the world.
Right.
But this one, again, is an alien invasion in the sense, not invasions in the sense. Quatermass is now retired, and his sole goal in life is looking for his granddaughter who's gone missing. And he makes his way to London because he's invited to participate in this TV program that's going to celebrate the fact that the Russians and the Americans are linking up in space. This is before it actually happened in real life. And he basically hijacks the program to make this plea for any information about his granddaughter, and basically say how really just terrible it is that the governments are wasting all this money to meet up in space when it's all needed down on Earth. So he hooks up with this young scientist who's also on the program, and he brings him out of London to this little isolated area that he lives with his wife and 2 children. And he's got this little radio telescope set up where he's, listening to space. And they discover that these groups of children roaming the land called the planet people, who believe that they're going to be taken away to another planet. And they follow this one group to this stone circle. And all of a sudden, this blinding light comes down, and everybody in the circle is gone, and this ash is left all over the place. And what they eventually discover is there's this alien intelligence that's culling the human life force, and that every certain number of years, 100, 200 years, the planets line up, and this thing just randomly can pick up on something in these stone circles were created by some ancient cultures because they knew that this is where it was going to land.
So, David, when was this filmed? This specific
79,
story?
1979.
And you know what? That really times out with the era too, because in the 70s, it was always about, look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where people were going missing. Project Blue Book, where you had Project UFO. That's an example of the television series. So there was a lot of talk about, even the Bermuda Triangle, UFOs taking over, people disappearing. So it kind of going in that direction with that almost ties in that era. A lot of Kneale is in this particular story. Quatermass's mindset is Kneale's mindset. Mm-hmm. He's more to his family. He's a bit, disappointed in the state of the world and the state of the way his career he's been treated in his career. So a lot of that is in Quatermass. And he, you see it just, it's a very depressing serial in comparison to what went on in the early ones. And again, it's the state of the world. It's how he sees the world. We're all focused on the wrong things. Well, I want to pivot back just real quickly too, because I didn't get the comments in. But one comment Lou had earlier was, he said Quatermass in the Pit, aka 5 Million Years to Earth, was great and scared me out of me when I was just a kid. So he was commenting on that. Dan comments and said, interesting interpretation and weaving of the real-time social issues in science fiction, which is carrying over into this piece, into this 1979 element. And Dan Murphy also commented that that element got diluted in the 5 Million Years to Earth while you were speaking about that. Nick Martin also said youth being corrupted.
It's interesting. It's interesting because the planet people are partly people who are just they're looking for the, a way out of the world. They're looking for something better, And it's almost an easy way out to just join up with this other group and just roam the countryside looking for, a way off the planet. And it's really no different now. If you hear some of the horror stories about things like people who are addicted to, social media and TikTok and stuff.
Oh, sure.
Some of these things haven't changed. That the environmental thing has gone full circle. We talked about that, I think, with other people a couple of days ago, that, back in the 60s, it was, the population of the planet is going to explode. We're running out of food and stuff. And then all of a sudden it kind of like went away. And now all of a sudden it's come back again. It's like people look for ways to, out of their fears, and they put blinders on. And like I said, Kneale was not a science fiction writer. He never professed to really being into science fiction. It just was a method to tell his stories. If anything, he was more into the history of occult and mysticism. As some people may or may not know, Kneale originally was engaged to write the script for Halloween 3. And much of that script got changed because the original idea was, we're not going to do we're not going to do Michael Myers again. We want to do something else. We want to put fresh ideas into the series so that we can do more Halloween movies about different things related to what Halloween is versus the shape. And then the studio came in and said, no, this is what we want. We don't want this. And they started changing the script, and Kneale took his name off of it.
Oh, that movie was so bad. I was not a fan of that movie. The third one. I mean,
because of what it became,
Yeah.
But
studio interference at its best, especially with that film.
Yeah. I mean, I always remember the story with Halloween 2 about how it was basically funded by Dino De Laurentiis, who tried to ride shotgun over John Carpenter, and his way of basically pushing him aside was, okay, you want to see the rushes, and he'd send them an hour of people running up and down corridors, just to get him to say, yeah, it's fine, go ahead, do what you want to do.
Yeah. Except for what was really going on. I just want to say goodnight to Nick. Nick, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you being out there. It's rather late in the UK right now. So
yeah. So and we, of course, we talked about the fact that Quatermass has changed in the actors, because we had, by the time they did Quatermass in the Pit, John Robinson passed away, and Andre Morel came in to do it finally, who was the original selection to do, Randolph Cartier's original selection, and he did that. But when they did the movie 8 years later, they had Andrew Kerr do it, and Andrew Kerr did a great job. But I think Andre Morel was really good, even though he was kind of playing second fiddle in the movie. He carried himself really well, and I think he was one of Kneale's favorites in the part. And then they actually they remounted the Quatermass experiment in Australia in 1967, the same year as Quatermass and the Pit came out as 5 Million Years to Earth, with Gary McDonald playing Quatermass. But I don't think that exists anymore. I haven't seen it. I've searched for it, unless somebody in Australia has it, knows about it. So when they did Quatermass, it was also known as the Quatermass conclusion for the feature film, which is the Omnibus, and John Mills now played Quatermass. And he carried the character really well for what Kneale had wrote there. Yep. And interesting thing was, in 1996, they decided to do a sort of an omnibus retelling of the Quatermass series on BBC Radio by using audio clips and narrations about Nigel Kneale's career. And it's called the Quatermass Memoirs, which is, I believe, available from the BBC, and you may be able to find it online. And what's interesting was Andrew Kerr came back and played Quatermass in the modern day, linking stories, where he's telling his story, even though we have, clips from the original series, the existing clips from the TV shows, as the background. I think they edited around Quatermass's dialogue for that, if I remember correctly, and that was a 5-part audio miniseries. And then,
what I think is really cool about everything with this, though, is this is something that originated in the 50s, and it pretty much has progressed up until, I guess, was it 2005 was the last time they actually did something with the characters?
2005, and
that's 50 years. I mean, that's pretty
right,
impressive.
Right. And in 2005, you had a lot of people who grew up on the serials and the movies involved in doing this remount. They decided they were going to try and recreate doing live television. It was kind of an experiment. I think they called it TV on trial. The idea was, we're going to try and remount the Quatermass experiment as live television, but instead of doing it as as the 6 parts, they did it as a TV movie, as it were. And it was all done live with a couple of little insert bits. Jason Fleming played a slightly younger kind of, dark Mac coat wearing Quatermass. Mark Gatiss was involved in it. And Mark Gatiss is one of those people who grew up on this stuff and is now, very active in Doctor Who and the Sherlock series. He was co-writer, co-creator, and he played Mycroft Holmes. And the most interesting about it is David Tennant was in it as Dr. Gordon Bristow, and David Tennant couldn't tell anyone that just before they started shooting, he was told he was Doctor Who. He had to keep that a secret from everybody on the show. He had to bite his tongue. But it's a really good attempt at doing it, but they kind of admit it failed, because it just didn't quite capture the gravitas of the original miniseries, because the pacing was too fast for the original miniseries, but not fast enough for what the feature film did. Mm-hmm. And then they had the idea, which Nigel Kneale actually signed off on, but it sounded better on paper than it did, in execution, which was, we were not going to see the final form of the creature. And Kneale's original concept was, Quatermass pleads with the consciousness of the 3 astronauts to basically dig deep into their humanity, to realize that if this creature succeeds in propagating, it'll destroy humanity. And he convinces the creature to essentially kill itself, which it does in the original miniseries, and it happens off screen. They have things like Gordon Fleming's just talking up to the ceiling, and then at times images, the actors will appear in spotlights as images of the astronauts. So like, I'm pleading with your humanity, please kill yourself, and then it just happens. That was the other thing about the original movie. Kneale didn't like the fact that they electrocuted the monster. It was like, it's not the humanity that's killing it.
Right.
So again, it's Kneale's need to be more human drama. And he actually, I think he passed away just before this thing was mounted. But they did get his approval to make the changes they did in it.
Well, that's a huge plot turn too, because really, if you're killing the creature through electricity, that means it's not being convinced of what it needs to do. It's not sacrificing. Whereas with going the other way, the 3 astronauts who have been absorbed, so to speak, and are, hanging on for just, dear life in regards to what humanity they have left, take the ultimate, plunge by essentially killing themselves, killing the
Right.
creature, so
Right.
that it doesn't destroy all of humanity as a
Yeah.
result of that. So those are two totally different directions then.
Yeah, because it goes down again to Kneale's need to tell a human story.
Yeah.
It's them doing the right thing. So because he always, as I said, he always found Brian Donlevy's performance as being a little too brutal, too bearish, which was not how he thought of Quatermass as a thinking scientist. And you'd see, sometimes it seems like he's bullying his way through sequences, and it's not. The writer has a right to have his interpretation of that.
Sure.
I again don't find Don Levy that objectionable in the role. I don't think any of the actors really did a poor job. Now, when we talk about, a lot of these stories we talked about may sound familiar because, again, Doctor Who used a lot of them. In particular, Quatermass in the Pit was essentially rewritten as John Pertwee's first Doctor Who serial. Suddenly I'm blanking on the title. I'm sorry. Someone could tell me what it was. The something. Anyway, because it has the same thing: little capsules coming down with alien life forms that are absorbed by people, and a lot of this, a lot of this stuff came into, and Doctor Who kind of like cherry picked from time to time all through its. And the writers of the show freely admit they did it. I mean, it was BBC property, so they could get away with it.
Right, they owned it.
Not happy about it, but they did kind of honor Kneale later on. There was a David Tennant serial where they refer to a scientist as Bernard, who may know about this alien invasion in this particular serial. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title on that one too.
Was it Spearhead from Space?
Spearhead from Space was the John Pertwee, and I'm trying to remember. Let me see if I can find the David Tennant one, because that's going to bother me unless somebody else comes up with it. Let's see, David Tennant.
And this is David Tennant's first episode, you were saying?
No.
Okay.
Much later on when he was doing Doctor Who.
While you're looking at that, Martin also commented a moment ago. He said ITV had a series called Children of the Stones around that time.
Children of the Stones. Another thing that Kneale wrote, which does exist, is the Stone Tapes, which was a group of, I believe, paranormal people who were investigating, I think, a castle or a house, and they discover that through their tape machines they can record spirits on it. I haven't actually seen it, but he wrote a lot of stuff. He did a serial called The Year of the Sex Olympics, which it came out before it became the norm on TV, but it pokes fun at reality television.
Oh, that's interesting. Hey, real quick, I just wanted to Mateo, thanks for joining. And he's saying it was Sylvester McCoy, Remembrance of the Daleks.
Oh, that could have been another one too. Oh, no, but there was a David Tennant one, I think too. Was it Remembrance? They refer to it. Well, I will defer to him. I could have sworn it was one of David Tennant's. I think it could have been Planet of the Dead. Before they go before they go through the warp to the Sand Planet with the unit squad, they had a scientist. They could have done it more than once. There's so many Doctor Who's to keep track of now, old and new. I mean, I think it took me a year to go through all the existing serials on BritBox. So
yeah, it's crazy.
From the old series.
60 years now.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And the fact that they can come up with stories a little bit fresher is a miracle. But you see the influence in the Quatermass serials, but it just shows you how, especially when they were live. I mean, the Quatermass conclusion is more or less sort of like watching a modest budget movie, since it was filmed. I mean, their biggest expense, besides the fact that they had to, create some, distressed looking London areas, they built 2 radio telescopes that moved on the location for the young scientists. And his wife was who was his wife? His wife was also an actress that we know from Space 1999. Quatermass.
And which one is this that you're referring to, David? This is from the last one?
Yeah. Let's see. Why am I only getting... I put in Quatermass and I only get the... That's really weird. Why it's telling me that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't pick up on that one for that connection there. I'm sure there is, though.
Let's see. Something's really weird with my phone because I'm not getting searches.
Oh, Isla Blair was in the last one. She was in the 2005 one.
Well, she was in the... No,
is that the one?
Yes, the 2005 one, yes.
Yeah,
she was in the 2005 one. I'm just trying to see who played. And for some reason, my phone's not working. Oh, God.
It happens with technology.
Yeah, I got it. Barbara Kellerman.
Oh, who was in Dragon's Domain?
Right. She played the young scientist's wife. She's only in, I think, the first episode. Simon McCorkindale is the young scientist who's essentially the main character of that. Bruce Purchase, who was Bruce Purchase, who went to play the pirate in Pirate Planet, the Tom Baker story. Mr. Fibulate, he plays a young scientist who works for McCorkindale, and like going, I know that voice, but he feels so different. It's like, oh my, he gained so much weight for that other role, or it was the suit. I don't know, but it just the what the BBC could accomplish, for nothing,
right
at that time. It's wonderful to see. When you look at the old serials, the key is in the writing.
Yeah.
Pure and simple.
Well, and that's the whole thing too. I mean, with science fiction, I mean, if you can, as long as you have a solid story, it's the environment. I mean, if you think about it, like I'll defer to Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek dealt with a lot of just different types of issues that were going on at the time. And I'm, dating back to the original series, and it just had its science fiction setting and to tell the stories. I mean,
because this was back when there wasn't the mindset of we'll fix it in post. You didn't have the visual effects that were going to, solve a lot of your problems. I mean, try to imagine. I mean, just this recent episode of The Mandalorian. Try to imagine that being done 20 years ago for television. It would not have been done. Because the entire episode was a giant special effect.
Yeah.
Between the flying around Alderaan, in the city, and then the flying in, on the planet with all the Mandalorians, none of that would have happened or wouldn't look that convincing.
Right.
And certainly if you did it on live television, it would have been just, oh, look what we saw, We'll be staring out a window, look at him doing this, look at him doing this, look at him doing this.
Right.
You never actually see it. They describe it later on because they couldn't show it. And by showing it convincingly, I think people's imaginations work better. Your imagination doesn't disappoint you the way the reality does. So again, it's going back to not seeing the boogeyman sometimes is scarier than actually seeing it.
Well, and I'll even connect with the movie Alien, the first Alien movie. You
Yeah.
very rarely see the alien in that film. Everything is, it's very dark. It's in the shadows, and it's very suspense driven. It's definitely different than the second Aliens film, which was more of a, I mean, it was sci-fi and it was adventure action. It was, you know, both are violent, but it was, they're two different types of movie making that are
No,
going on.
the boo factor is almost completely gone in Alien until you see the Queen. The Queen's
Yeah.
the big build. What is creating these eggs? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that sets you going until you see it. But you know, some of the greatest monster movies of the 50s, the monster is only revealed in the last few seconds of the movie sometimes. You know, it's one or two shots because the monster costume really doesn't hold up for scrutiny. But that's what makes it more thrilling. I mean, the movie that really was the basis of Alien, It, The Terror from Beyond Space. Most of the time you see it, you either see the claw or you just see the shadow until you finally see the creature. But by then, you know it's a monster. But up to that point, it's like, what is this thing that's aboard the ship creating this havoc?
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's why some of the best 50s monsters were too cerebral. Probably that's why they put the titles on, you know, the creeping unknown onto these to make them seem a lot scarier. Because you got to remember, they were probably programmed to double features anyway. You know, even though they were much longer movies because they didn't really cut them down much for American television. I think American theaters, but that's what most movies were. They were for double features because, you know, you want to get the kids into the theater who aren't really watching the movie anyway.
Yeah.
But a double feature is a great night out in the dark, you know.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
No, they don't. They don't. In fact, I'm actually working with a friend's record company doing an album of some of 3 scores to 350s science fiction movies, and 2 of them are, you know, they're great. They're little low budget things. One actually is, in comparison to the other 2 films, is big budget because that one cost $400,000, where the other ones were, you know, pennies on the dollar. And one's a Roger Corman movie, but Roger Corman always managed to really get bang for his buck in his movies. He knew how to you know, really shake that tree to get everything on screen. The other movie really tries hard to do what it does. We're on it because it's an early Jerry Freed score. And I knew Jerry, and you know, since he passed away recently, we really wanted to honor Jerry, and it's a decent score. It's actually it's actually pretty good. We have 3 good scores on the album, but watching these movies again, you just see how really artistry works for people who are hungry to show what they can do, you know, who haven't had breaks in the industry and really, you know, put in that extra mile to work within the limited budgets. So
there's
you know,
so much talent out there too.
Yeah. No, if it wasn't for the fact that the BBC had a hole in their schedule, so they probably would have passed on the script had Kneale just submitted it, but they needed something right away. And the fact that Rudolph Cartier knew that this medium could be pushed further, that it wasn't simply, you know, shooting a stage play, or as they thought of it, radio and television, radio with pictures. That they were given this opportunity, and because nobody wanted to touch him, you were even going to Doctor Who. If you look at the history of Doctor Who, or that movie they did about the making of the series Adventure in Time and Space, people in the BBC in the art department didn't want to touch the show. They thought it was beneath them, so they didn't care what the people who were working on it did. So people got opportunities to really show their stuff. And that's where sometimes artistry really shines, is when, you know, somebody who's, go ahead and do it, I don't care.
Yeah.
They get away with it.
Yeah, because they have the opportunity. Sue is commenting, and Sue, it's interesting that you're bringing up this movie because I was actually going to mention it earlier. She's saying, Roy, a
Yeah.
good example of the unseen being super scary was the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956, Don Siegel's movie. I think it was
Yeah.
one of the scariest movies ever made because it's all psychological versus seeing the thing that was scary. Yeah, great example.
Right. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers was the Cold War, the Red Scare at the time, under the guise of an alien invasion movie. The same thing that Rod Serling did with Twilight Zone, the Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek. It was taking contemporary social issues, things that people were concerned about, stories in the newspaper, and showing it in a way that appealed to a mass audience because it was being played off as fantasy, even though it was dealing with a real subject. I mean, you could very easily take the Quatermass stories and flip them around into something real world. And they're still going to hold their power, but they're going to be more obvious.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that you have to come up with a baddie that's going to offend somebody. Aliens from outer space so far have not offended anybody. In that sense. So it's an easy way around it. I mean, I was just talking about these 50s movies. There's this one movie that we're working on called the Lost Missile. And the missile could have been fired from the Soviet Union, but instead someone surmises, it's a rocket from outer space. Well, gee, that just completely undermines the idea that it's the Cold War. The idea that that the Russians are going to fire intercontinental ballistic missiles on the United States, but it tells the story without offending anybody.
Right.
Who's Russian?
It's not happening on the planet. It's coming from an outside force.
Right. So you get to tell. It's a great way to tell these stories, and really not offend people, but get your point across.
Yeah.
So it's
and that's what Roddenberry was doing. And that's what Sue's reaffirming. Where the best science fiction is a reflection of commentary of social issues. Yeah.
I mean, these days, you have to be even more careful not to tread on toes, because you want to tell a social issue story, but somebody's going to get offended.
Yeah,
and it's very different. So it's harder to get past the stuff. That's where, again, science fiction works. Gene Roddenberry and Rod Serling were able to get stuff past the network censors because it was disguised as science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're getting past the other censors by disguising it in a way, but telling the story. It just makes storytelling a little more difficult now. But you could just see about the way the world was at the time, to tell the same social issues. And some of the fears still exist, we
it definitely does. It's just in a different direction, and everything that's happened in direction of where we are within the world. There's so many things that are open to interpretation, and so many issues that folks want to engage in. So you could actually have a field day with it.
Well, I mean, a couple of years ago, it was virtual reality and computers taking over the world.
Now, of course, everyone's Y2K, right?
Well, Y2K was the crash.
The crash.
That was going to be the end of the world. 2012 was going to be the end of the world because that was on the Mayan calendar. And now, of course, everyone's talking about ChatGPT. It's like that's going to be the end of jobs, and there's always something that's going to scare us. The question is, how do we talk about it in a way that gets us to think about it? And that's this. Nigel Kneale was one of the pioneers as to how to get television to talk about the things that people were afraid of in ways that people, can understand without, offending anybody, in the sense that, it's the Russians, it's this. No, it's aliens, but we're afraid.
You don't have to. Dan is commenting,
Yeah,
saying this would be a great time to do a remake of the Terranauts, aka the Waiting Asteroid, with space travel
Whaling.
adventure.
Yeah. That was a fun little movie. That a little more low budget than it should have been. I mean, again, that was Les Bowie doing the effects. They also used it was Amicus Pictures that Barry Gray did a lot of sound effects for the Doctor Who movies, Island of Terror and stuff. And then they actually, I think they lifted Whole Heart, a little bit of Barry Gray music for one scene in the movie very quickly, but it's there. I could spot it. But that's you have a lot of fun movies.
In fact, one of the things I wanted to bring up too, and I'm just before we start to wind down a little bit, is in regards to connections, because we were talking about connections with Space 1999. The music in the first Quatermass film, it was right in the beginning too, right? Mars Bringer of War.
The first two serials used Mars Bringers of War, and then they had some original music for Quatermass in the Pit for the first time.
So that was pretty cool. I mean, right away, and those folks that don't know, that's from Space Brain with Shane Rimmer playing Kelly. Right. So that was pretty cool.
And the first, I believe, Quatermass Experiment, the film, was James Bernard's first score for Hammer.
Oh, okay.
Bernard, of course, went on to become their major composer throughout that. Tristram Cary did the Quatermass in the Pit feature, and he did a lot of experimental electronic music as well. And a lot of his stuff was used in the early Doctor Who's, particularly the Patrick Troughton ones. So a lot of cross-pollination. We won't talk about the Quatermass conclusion music. It's not my favorite. They did do Mars in the Quatermass 2005.
Oh, they did
film. They used it for the opening because they actually used footage from the opening in that. Because they start with the beginning footage and then they go into color with it. I think that's also on. You'd probably be able to find that on YouTube as well. A lot of them are on YouTube, definitely.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can find on YouTube. I mean, it's wonderful. And the other thing I wanted to do too is I wanted to share, because we always like to give Starlog magazine, which you remember back in the day. If you have a chance, Starlog magazine Starlog issue number 139 actually had a interview with Nigel Kneale. So, and this was the February '89 issue. And interesting enough, Star Trek: The Next Generation is on the cover, and this is, I think, this would have been when Next Generation was in its second season, and then also a tie-in with Space 1999. Martin Landau was interviewed in this issue of Starlog. So there you go.
If you can search out, I do recommend you get Andy Murray's Into the Unknown: The Fantastic Life of Nigel Kneale, which gives a nice little detailed background into Kneale's life. He was born on the Isle of Man, and he had a nice romance with his wife, which is all detailed in there, and that affected his life, his family, and all his other productions. I mean, going right through from beginning to end. And he did a really nice book. If you want to order the movies, you can still get this from Kino, Quatermass Experiment, and Quatermass 2 and Quatermass in the Pit are available from Shout Factory. I think they're on Scream Factory. There's also a lot of good commentary and stuff on that. The Quatermass Experiment, the BBC Live, was not released here. If you have either a region free player or you know how to play region 2 stuff on your computer, you can get this. I think it's still available from the BBC. The A&E one, of course, is out of print on this. Network in England, who put out all the Space 99 Blu-rays, the Super Space Theater and stuff. They have this available, but it's region B. So again, you'd have to have a region-free Blu-ray player to play it. And I'm not sure if this is still available. It may be out of print at this point, the serials, but the serials are on YouTube, so you can watch them all there. And as I said, if you see Quatermass Experiment, look for somebody put up these nice little 5-minute recaps with telesnaps of the 4 episodes. You may be also able to find the scripts online as well. At least for that.
They did a nice job with that. And one other thing too, David, as we start to go down, I want to give you a plug for your books that you and Bob Wood did too. So can folks still get these? Yeah.
They both are, I believe, you can get them through Amazon, which is the easiest way. And Telos, if you're in England, you can go or from Telos to Everything That Might Have Been, and maybe there is the Jerry Anderson store.
Okay, just so folks
but
know.
Definitely are on Amazon. There are Kindle versions available to both for those. I know a lot of people like the Kindles because they're easier to read, and I don't believe they're not on iBooks, just Kindle.
Okay. Gotcha.
Also on the Kindle. The Kindle version may be there. You have the one illustration of the Keith Wilson Matter of Life and Death art is in color on the Kindle version. The paperback is black and white. So.
Oh, there you go. So there's an added bonus right there.
But if you're in Calgary, Robert said he's bringing them because Robert owns that painting and 2 others. Keith Wilson production art. He says he's bringing them to the convention.
Cool. Very cool. And one last comment too. Martin said the serials you can get through Amazon. I guess you just
good. Great. Yeah. So if you have Amazon Prime, I guess you can purchase them.
So thanks for checking on that, Martin. I'm just going to go to the shout outs real quick. And then folks, if you have any last minute comments, you can come back and we'll come back to it and we'll just post them out. So I just want to didn't want to do that. I hit the wrong one. So I want to, hold on here. Present. There we go. There's more steps than there were before. I just want to give a shout out to Mike and Mary Beth for Sci-Fi Distilled. They are on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. And it's Eastern Daylight Time. We are now in Daylight Time. So they've been doing their discussion of Robot Month, and they are going to be finishing that up this coming Wednesday. And they're going to also be having a guest with them, and it is David, and I'm going blank on David's last name. And
Not me.
And it's not David Hirsch.
Nope.
It's terrible. But anyway, David from
old age is terrible. Yeah.
It's starting to take hold.
I know.
Yeah, but anyway, it's David who joins us up, friend from the Star Trek set tour. He's actually going to be joining, and we'll be up there too. So anyway, that will be on this coming Wednesday. Yes, thank you, Sue. David Lafredo. Sorry, David, if you're out there. I didn't mean to forget you. But as David Hirsch just reminded me of, old age is, terrible.
There's too much stuff up here. It's not filed properly.
It's so true. Yes, Martin. I think Starlog did put out a robot book for.
We did. We did a guidebook. Yeah.
Yeah, because you did the spaceships, you did the robots, you did the aliens,
and heroes, villains, weapons.
That's right.
Alien planets, fantastic planets, and there was supposed to be a sci-fi vehicles book, but they canceled the series. No, I've got all the text here still. I don't have all the graphics because some of that got returned to the original owners, and I do have the cover.
Sue's saying she has all the Starlog guidebooks.
Yeah, I wish somebody had scanned those in the way they did the issues of Starlog. They're very helpful.
Yeah, that would have been.
Oh, cool. And a shout out to John Zipper, who wrote the Starlog companion, which is available through Amazon. He's got the first volume out. It's a nice little history of the magazine.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And you can get that where online
on Amazon. On Amazon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I have it in the room, but I should have had it here to show. But...
Yeah, next time. Definitely do bring it on next time.
And to get it slightly off topic, it's kind of exciting. They are releasing for the first time the original novels that were released in Japan. They've been translated into English for the first two Godzilla films. Godzilla and Godzilla Raises Again are going to be released in the fall in English for the first time. And that's available for pre-order on Amazon too. I've already pre-ordered it because I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it was written up.
There's a lot of good stuff out there that you can get a hold of. It's amazing. So yeah, that's good to know too. I want to give a shout out to my. Oh, and Sue just put in the information in regards to the Starlog compendium volume.
Yep.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to my friend Bill Scarrato, who's out there tonight. Bill is the owner of Country Gate Theater in Belvedere, New Jersey. So, folks, if you are in the Belvedere area, and they're opening the season up with Sylvia, and this is a play by A.R. Gurney, and the dates are going to be Saturday, April 22nd and Sunday, April 23rd, as well as Saturday, April 29th and Sunday, April 30th. The Saturday shows are at 8 p.m., and the Sunday shows is for the 2 o'clock matinee. This is going to be Country Gate's opening show. For information, you can go to the website, which is www.countrygate.org, or you can also visit Bill's website, which is www.billscarrato.com. And next, I just want to give a quick shout out to the ladies, and that's going to be Snow and Martha, and they are at Studio One Thrift. Their business has been in operation coming up on a year right now, and they showcase their lineup for all seasons all year long. It's quality, stylish, affordable clothing for men and women. You can also receive styling tips and information updates. Now, they have a new website. Their website is www.studio1thrift.net. And when you do go to that website, be sure to subscribe, and you can also order from anywhere in the country. So definitely check that out. And then also, I want to give shout outs in regards to upcoming conventions. So as David was just talking about, the Calgary convention is going to be coming up. This is going to be for a Relaxicon for Space 1999. It is the dates of April 28th through May 1st. And for room booking information, you can email destinationmoonbasealpha@yahoo.com. Also, if you go to the Facebook page, which is the Space 1999 50th anniversary celebration, there's information in regards to the event. It is going to be a fun event. Actor and our own very Nick Tate, Alan Carter, a.k.a. is going to be there, Alan Carter. Nick will be there arriving on Friday, and he will be there until Tuesday. And then also Yasuko Nakazumi is going to be joining us as well too. So that has not been announced. So I just wanted to put that out there. So looking forward to the event. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be the first time there's been an event actually in Canada in some time as well. So it will be definitely cool. And then of course the expo is going on in Calgary at the same time. So anyway, it's going to be a fun weekend, lots to do, and it'll be great to catch up with Space 1999 fans. And David, you will be there.
Yep. And I'm bringing Eagle 11 for those of you who haven't seen it, which is the original small filming model. And we're hoping to have Eagle 3 there, which is the third 44-inch Eagle. We were still waiting for confirmation from its owner. And I'm really excited to see Nick again. And of course, Yasuko, who is an absolute sweetheart. And my wife and I owe her lunch from our trip out to Los Angeles, where she insisted on taking us out to lunch, which was very nice of her. You will not be disappointed in meeting her.
No, she's very, very sweet.
Yeah.
And everyone knows Nick, so it's definitely going to be a fun time.
Next, Walker, but she's got a great smile.
Want to give a shout out to Trek Long Island. Trek Long Island is coming up, folks. And if you're in the Long Island area, the dates are May 20th and 21st, which is actually my mom's birthday, the 21st and 20. It's going to be coming up. So it's going to be a fun weekend. There's a lot of guests that are scheduled from the different series of Star Trek and all the way up to current. So definitely check out the website. Go to www.treklongisland.com. Special note, the hotel is currently sold out, but there are surrounding hotels that you can go to, which are in the area, and there's information on the website. So just want to advise everybody on that, but it's going to be an incredible time. This is going to be the first really big official Star Trek convention taking place in Long Island, and very much looking forward to it. So definitely check that out. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out for Wonderfest. Wonderfest is going to be taking place in Louisville, Kentucky. It is of the dates of June 10th and 11th, which is a Saturday and Sunday. And that's a little less than 3 months away. It's the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. So they're going to be dealing with that as far as themed. But also there's going to be a huge Space 1999 exhibit going on there, as well as, David was saying, we're going to have the exhibit going on in Calgary as well too. But in regards to this, Nick Tate will also be there. Looking forward to seeing Nick again. If you don't have the opportunity to get to Calgary, you can see him in Wonderfest or vice versa. So a lot of stuff in regards to Space 1999 is going on. So for information, again, www.wonderfest.com for information details. And want to give a shout out to my co-host, Ross Amico. Now, he has a show that is on Saturdays and Sundays. Now, this is on the radio station. It's WWFM, the Classical Network. If you go to the internet, it is www.wwfm.com. His Saturday show is Picture Perfect, which is on at 6 p.m. And then he also has The Lost Chord, which you can tune into tonight, is at 10 p.m. And again, it's Eastern Daylight Time. We are in Daylight Savings Time. So also, one other thing I wanted to do is also give a mention to, as we remember, Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy's birthday was today, and he would have been 92 years old, and sadly he left us in 2015. It's crazy to think it's been 8 years since he passed.
Yeah.
But just wanted to remember and honor him. I mean, just such a wonderful person to have met, even if it was just briefly. But he had, so many fans worldwide, such a talent on so many levels, as far as acting, directing, writing, photography. So anyway, just wanted to remember him today for his birthday. And then the other thing is, if you haven't been watching Star Trek Picard, definitely check it out. It's a favorite of mine. Really, really enjoying the season. Episode 7 is going to be coming up this coming Thursday, which is March 30th, which is going to be entitled Dominion. And the rumor has it there's going to be a special guest that's going to be in this. They have not announced, because if they were to announce who it would almost give a lot of the plot away. So anyway, definitely check it out if you haven't. And hopefully if you've been watching it, you've been enjoying it. And it's definitely been a lot of fun. There's a lot of nostalgia with this show for this season. So just want to put that out there. One of the last things I want to say is we are doing Roy's tie-dye Sci-Fi Corner t-shirts. If you are interested in purchasing a t-shirt to help support the show, they are $35. You can instant message me, and we're going to be doing an ordering of that coming up very soon, probably within the next week or so. I kind of extended it out. And if you can send it, what you can do is, if you have Venmo, that is probably the best way. And again, if you're interested, let me know. I've been getting instant messages from different folks, so we appreciate the support for the show. And it's hard to believe that we are actually coming into the official anniversary. Ross and I will be closing out the 3rd season this coming Friday, and that'll be on the 31st. We haven't announced what the topic will be, but we are going to be celebrating 3 years and preparing for the show's 4th season, as the show officially aired on April 3rd of 2020. So again, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has been a viewer of the show and has joined the show, and either watches us live or when you're watching the recorded versions. Your support has been very much appreciated. And like I said, Ross and I will be back this Friday, so we will announce what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, but
you planning on doing a live show from the convention in Calgary?
Yeah, you know what? I am. I think that would be kind of cool to do. And actually, we're gonna actually be broadcasting live from Trek, Long Island. So I really would like to be able to broadcast from Calgary. I think it would be great because we'll have Nick there, we'll have Yasko there, you'll be there with Bob, so we can definitely and we'll give Warren can give updates in regards to how the things have been progressing with the convention. I think it'd be just an interesting take to do, and I think it would be a lot of fun just to connect with the viewers. So.
Well, we could set up based on where what the situation is and the Wi-Fi and everything. And
it'd
be kind of doing like another virtual convention in a way.
Yeah. I think it would be cool. So, thanks for mentioning that, David. So
I'm always happy to give you more work.
The list gets longer and longer. But anyway, folks, thank you so much, David. Thank you as always for coming on. It's always a pleasure.
We were able to get around to doing this one.
Like you said at the beginning of the show, we've been talking about this for a long time. So, but everyone, have a great night.
I had to break you into this.
What was that?
I had to break you into it. It wasn't something I know about this. I want to talk about this.
That's what I love about the show. I mean, it's like learning different, new and different things. And Quatermass I had never heard of, so it totally worked out.
Yeah,
so,
well,
live long and prosper, everyone.
Okay. Take care.
Take care, everyone.